Hey guys, kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Trapcode Tao, or Dao as it's properly pronounced, but I've already gotten used to just being super American and just saying Tao, so I've said Tao a million times, and so now it's just stuck in my head that way. Either way, there's a super good resource on Red Giant. They have this kind of user manual which they put together, which I think walks through all of the features in really good detail, and it's really great reference for if you're trying to animate something and it's not quite working out how you thought. There's some really specific stuff that they've put in here that I think is just really nice to come back to and kind of see like, oh well, I didn't realize that I was not supposed to be animating other things when this thing is turned on or off or what have you. The other great resource, obviously, is the community. People have been posting stuff on Vimeo since the beta, and there has been some really cool stuff made with it. Especially if you look at Peter's Vimeo page, he is just killing it and making some really beautiful stuff. So it's a great resource already out there, but I just kind of wanted to go over some of the things that I kind of made during the beta and then also kind of after. But most is from the beta, and most of it, I've, kind of surprised most of it still works because the functionality has changed so much since the early beta. But um, either way, it's a really diverse plugin. This example that I have open right now kind of started from this guy, which, early on, one of the first things I wanted to do was like, okay, cool, you can kind of make paths with it. So, um, what are some like interesting, geometric things you could do with paths? Okay, well, you could make a simple extruded uh, rectangle like here. But what's great about it is that, um, so I've used the mask on this one, um, and have just tried to evenly space them based on my segment size, which is 55.3, to generate cubes essentially along these paths. What's great is then you can do stuff like that, and then you can just kind of jump down to the repeat pass. Then all of a sudden, you kind of instantly start getting some pretty fun stuff. Let me move around here a little bit. If we rotate, let me move my axis point down in the Z a little bit. You can get some really kind of like interesting effects, and all this can be animated and played with. Um, Playing with it kind of reminds me of like the cloner effect inside cinema, where you kind of get this taking one object, multiplying it. It's kind of what this repeat pass, and then subsequently the kind of offset um, animation sequence end up giving you some like flexibility control over how many uh, repetitions of your original geometry. Um, just some interesting, fun things to play with. And of course, anytime you kind of have like ambient occlusion, you can kind of get some really interesting overlap. Lighting wise in the scene, it's just super simple using. I don't even think I'm using. Oh, okay. So I was using an environment, but since this was from the beta, there wasn't the built-in environment, so it had something here, but just because of it's old, it's messed up. So disregard that. I mean, like if I tried to use one of these, I'm guessing it would kind of freak out and be really intense. Like I said, set up from the beta, so it was meant for something different. Um, so that's that. Like I said, the basis of this was really simple. The idea that I wanted to execute was simply make an extruded rectangle, and what would that look like if you started playing with that and breaking that up? So I mean, if you went into the offset, into the segment randomness, you can play with the Y and the Z, and you can kind of start seeing what's happening here is that there's all of these cubes, they're making up the structure, and then that's repeated. Right now it's like kind of interesting. You're getting these arcs through it because the unique seeds when repeated isn't on. So if I checked this, that would kind of go away, and you would see that each time that it's being repeated, it's seeding all of the random values. But since I only have 2 here, the Y and Z, that's really all that it's playing with. You could play with the actual positions of each, the rotations, it kind of opens up and goes crazy. So with that said, I mean, this was like my base example, and I started playing with, I have a couple of other ones where, so this same setup again, but I didn't make the full, I just wanted to look at a corner instead of the full thing. So in this one, I'm playing with the offset animation to kind of have this build on. And if we look at the keyframes on this, I'm animating the offset animation sequence values. And I'm animating the size over time and the position over time. And then, the duration I'm set it to is 10, but, we're just animating within the first 6 seconds almost. So that's how much it's applying it over the length of the stroke or mask in this case. But either way, again, this kind of goes back to my C4D MoGraph reference where, this feels definitely like something very clonery that you might generate. Again, I had set out with a very simple idea of what I wanted to do. It's like, building something with blocks. I think at work at the time we were working on this big job of like everything was made out of these bits of data. So I think that was just on my mind during this point in the beta. Sheen, reflection, AO, all that's, kind of coming into play from the materials and lighting. Another take on this was this one that I had opened when we first started. Again, playing with the same kind of general path, but playing with that in animation, like how does that, kind of build on and animate and form a different structure. Again, this is just using the repeat paths and the offset animation. What's great is at the time of making this, I think there was only 1 repeater, so you could even take this a little bit further and like, almost make a tunnel. If I put this probably in Z, I don't know how wide this actual object is. It's probably, oh, there you go, somewhere about 600-700. Yeah, there was only 1 repeat pass at the time of making it, so I didn't really do something like this, but you can see you can get some really complex, interesting animation pretty fast. Looks like my visibility is pretty low, so if I just crank that up and maybe just make it black, it would probably look better. Probably even let it bring it in some. So there you have it. That's the same effect, but just kind of duplicated down as it's repeated. So again, pretty straightforward exercise in what I was interested in trying to build, and just kind of playing with the offset animation stuff. I'm still trying to figure it out. It's it's kind of one of those things, you're kind of layering your effect, so you're coming up with your initial animation and making that look really cool, and then just trying to build that out and echo that out. So I think this is definitely one of those plugins where if you go in with an idea of what you want to make, you're most likely going to come out the other side with something you're happy with, rather than I feel like sometimes when I come in just to experiment and play around, I kind of get lost because I start playing with like too much stuff too quickly. I want to start playing with animation when I haven't figured out the exact look yet, or I want to start playing with the different segment stuff. Again, like I just, as soon as you establish what you're kind of going for, I think you can kind of jump in and make some cool stuff. Okay, so that's boxes. There's lots of boxes, fun stuff. This is another thing that I was making around the same time. This is using probably a null a light is parented to a null to get my path here. The reason why I did that is because I wanted to have that initial movement, but I broke it up into, separated out the X, Y, and Z so that I could animate the Z separately, so that as I move around this, you can kind of see it's just moving back in Z space, just to give some depth, to play with kind of like the light fall off, and also I was playing with depth of field at the time, so I wanted to see what that looked like, which, if you drop down here to the bottom, under rendering, we could do, let me minimize this, depth normalized, and you can see that that's what that gets. Different cases are, obviously your settings are going to vary, but sometimes when I run into kind of the halo, what I end up doing is just like a simple choker, to kind of eat back some of that if I'm trying to get a super clean depth of field or something. But I don't know, it's another discussion, but that's what this was doing. I don't think this animation is very interesting. Like I said, it was more of just kind of like a experiment with the path. Look, I animated the color of the light, so as the stroke moves along, we get rotations based on the light's actual, if we look at the settings here, segment, it's orienting to the path, which, as my light moves, it's in space, it's orienting the repeated geometry based on that. And then I have it twisting, and delta's, no randomness. This is just repeating a simple 5-sided object, and right now it's in wireframe. If I had it on fill, you would see they're just kind of rectangles, or 5-sided, I guess, so not rectangles. And then, you could turn on and off caps if you would kind of get something closer to the wireframe look, because now we're just looking at the sides of it. But I thought it's fun. Again, another example of, I know this is still geometric, but just kind of the range that you can kind of get out of this is pretty interesting. So that's that. Something completely different is this kind of like asteroid field that I wanted to play with. I think at the time, Peter started adding in some of this material qualities, and one of the things that I was playing with was the normals. You can bring in a normal map and apply it to the geometry, so it can kind of reference that and kind of generate bumps, which I thought was pretty cool. So I had no idea what I wanted to make, but I just this ended up being kind of asteroid-like, so just went with that. I think this was sound driven, so it kind of moves around, but it's pretty heavy, so I won't waste much time and RAM preview that. I mean, I could, but it's just not very interesting. Again, with me talking about not knowing what I wanted to go in and make, I started making something that was visualizing music, but it really wasn't working with this specific example, so it just didn't work out. But nonetheless, this plays with kind of some light rays, and I think they had updated Shine at the same time, so just wanted to drop that in, play with it. The lighting, it's using the lighting to wrap it around. You get this interesting kind of light effects. The spec, is pulling in these greens. And the bump. Straightforward, but something different. And then I think around the same time, wanted to still playing with this kind of normal map idea. I think it's something that's kind of interesting when you're just applying it to like spheres. So I think I had just, Googling random normal maps, I think I came up with something that was like a ball of some sort. Sorry. I think this was like I don't even know what this package is, what it's called. But it kind of reminded me of a hot air balloon or something, punching bag style geometry. So that's kind of what I ended up going with. It was that. beanbag, and just kind of made a tunnel. The tunnel is using image-based lighting, and also I have a couple of Tao Lumi lights, which are kind of additive lights to your current lighting. So it's almost like if you wanted to create something that looked like it was emitting light in a way, so it affects the luminance. Um, like Peter's done a really great, interesting example here where he had put this all these spheres in a cathedral, used the HDRI to get the lighting, but then he also dropped in some Lumi lights to um, illuminate the center of these and make them feel really interesting, like balloons or something. It's a really nice effect, and it's a great way for adding kind of some like extra, you know, soft light, or if you're again trying to go for like the translucent look. It does a really good job of that. So it's using those, and oh, sorry. Again, some of this stuff is from beta, so it just, the code is different, and I noticed that when I was looking for a couple of other examples that I wasn't very happy with some of them. So by the way, that was a pretty basic example. There's nothing crazy going on. Like I said, it's just using um, one kind of simple ring that I've made, and then we're repeating that in the Z to get this kind of interesting twist. Playing with spec, to get some interesting highlights, but pretty much straightforward, nothing crazy. This other example that I did was a snake texture, which took a little bit of work, and to be honest, it's kind of really one of those like one trick pony. It's if you move the camera in this instance, I think it would really lose the illusion pretty fast. But what I did to generate this, guys, it's kind of the same thing where oh, sorry, that's for lighting. Let's jump into here. I mean, this is a little bit more complex just in terms of like what we're playing with. So we can kind of look at what's going on in here. I'm using a light again, and I broke out my position to X, Y, and Z so that I could play with the depth, because I knew I kind of wanted this overlapping, and it kind of took a little bit of play with my actual position keyframes to kind of control these corners on it, because the texture, since this is an extrusion, it's not multiple polygonal objects across the segment or across the path. It's just one piece of geometry. So the problem with that is that in how it's trying to texture it, it ends up kind of flipping or reacting weird around corners, which, I mean, this still is, I mean, I got this kind of close, and I'm cheating it a lot with the color correction so that I'm, using the depth of field to hide stuff, but I think it works pretty well. I think had I used a better texture, it probably would have worked better too. I had found a snake texture online. If we go and look at that, yeah, as you can see, this definitely was a project where I had multiple iterations of what was happening and trying to figure out what was the best approach to doing this. If we look at the snake tile, what I did was take a snake image I'd found online, kind of really cheesily took it in Photoshop and tried to, make it seamless. I just wanted something to work with, really. I wasn't trying to go for perfect here. And with that, I also took that into Photoshop. And what's nice is that there's a new normal feature built inside of Photoshop, so you don't have to do. I downloaded this ghetto normal map preset, which is pretty interesting in the way that it works, to the RGB values and then separate them and then give you some sort of control over the amount and the softening. I use the same texture for my tile for the normal map, just like, again, I like playing with the new features inside of it at the time of the beta, so I knew that's something that I wanted to play with. So again, if you go down to material and lighting, this was playing with the sheen, how much light is wrapping around the corners, the shininess. It was using image-based lighting for whatever reason. Again, old beta, I don't have access to swapping it out, but it's still referencing it at least this time. And for that, if you want to look at it, I just grabbed one of those typical studio HDRI images and use that as my source of lighting. Let me close out some of this other stuff. I tried a bump map approach. I think I ended up using this for the specular. I think if we drop down the textures. Yeah, so I ended up using that for specular map, the normal map, and then also, the color texture. So that's kind of the approach for this. The actual scale took a little bit of playing just to figure out, what looked right for the length of my path. So in this case, the defaults were 1, which you can see that the scale of that is just way too big. Depth of field. Usually what I end up doing for the depth of field is making my initial scene pretty, I'm happy with it. I know I'm not going to be messing with the actual settings too much, and pretty much I'm ready to jump to the next comp, is where I'm going to do color correction, extra lights, background, that sort of stuff. So I'll duplicate this comp and then just drop the rendering down to depth normalized, like I said before. And then I'm using levels and a blur on this. The blur was just to kind of, I'm fighting banding on this one. I'm guessing it's also because I'm in 8-bit. I could try moving to 16 and seeing what it does, but I mean, my textures and all of that. Oh, there you go. Moving to 16 kills that. So I probably don't necessarily need this, but I also kind of wanted to blur the geometry in between where they overlap just a little bit for my, I think it was just what was working well for my particular scene. So that's what I'm using to drive, just probably not even a fancy blur, it's just the built-in camera lens blur. And then, I think I just have a background with a light just to get some fall off. Very simple, basic setup. But yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, this example works for the specific angle. I think if we went in here, and I would probably have to copy with property links and paste that into here, but that way, if I moved around, like I said, you're going to see some of this weird stretching, and again, the bending around the corners is really kind of dependent upon where you're looking. Like I said, I tried to fix it for most of it, but it's really on how the Tao path is kind of orienting around the bends, which I think, Peter ended up working on quite a little bit more, so I think it's been more refined since I was working on this, but it's pretty fun. Like I said, it's kind of a one-trick pony thing. Kind of was meant to look at it from that front angle is mainly what I was playing with. You can kind of see how the spec is working. If I turn off that, again, let's see if this crashes. I don't know if it'll let me, but if I take the spec map and turn that off, you see how it's more of like a overall global specular, because it's just thinking about this thing as a singular surface rather than kind of breaking it up again to match this texture that I have. Which doesn't look awful bad or anything, but it's, I just kind of liked what was happening. That was the, I don't even know which one that was. Oh, whatever. Just undo it. Bump. Bottom one. So yeah, that's pretty much all this guy was doing. Look at this, a little bit of a fractal to give it some unevenness. I think if I pushed this too far, it started, you know, getting a little funky, but still kind of interesting. I think I ended up doing kind of like a test animation of this just to see what it looked like, playing with like the offset. It's kind of interesting, kind of fun. Yeah, but I mean that's pretty much all of the examples that I did during the beta that I was just going to walk through. Again, I think this plugin has quite a bit of range on the possibilities. Actually, there was another test I had here. Apparently not. Interesting. Let me see if I can open up a project real quick. See how this goes. Oh, nope. Oh, it's the tracker. That's what it is. This guy. It's kind of something different. Again, that's apparently the theme. I wanted to play with it in 3D space, and so I kind of took this crappy iPhone footage that I shot in Vegas somewhere, going down a spiraling escalator. And here I've taken a light and animated it kind of spiraling down in the Y position, and I've applied spheres to that, and then with the repeater I've kind of made duplicates and gave that random values in the X, Y, and Z, and then with the offset animation animating the values so that it kind of looks like it's building into place. But interesting that you could do. If we jump in here, again, made in beta, so grain of salt here. If stuff crashes, I promise, not my fault. Not Tao's fault either. I mean, code completely changed, so there's that. Using the segment, using repeat sphere. If I turn off the repeat pass, we can kind of look at what's happening. I think there was only one repeater at the time, so I don't think I'm using the second one. I'm using offset animation, animating the size. So if I look at the keyframes on this, the size is animating on, and then position, we're kind of moving in Z space over the first initial frames that it's existing as our path offset is animating. And evolution. What are we playing with on evolution? My guess it would be this fractal. So with the fractal, we're not being used. Interesting. Whatever. So that path, if I just gave this a little bit more, you could see that we get some more spheres there. And then with the repeat, just really just kind of adding filler and getting extra ones in there. But there's a lot of really interesting things you can do with this. I'm not even touching on a lot of the things that I think Peter obviously has done a great job of covering. Mainly like doing this, like if you're doing repetition, you can use the repeat color layer, and it uses the colors. Like if you had a gradient in the Y value, it would apply that to the repeats as they echo out, I guess, for another. So if you had 5, his gradient is going from white to blue or purple or whatever, and it's applying that as it. But it gives this like really cool kind of ice cream like effect. I don't know what else to call it, but again, he's I feel like he's covered that stuff really well. Even some of the newer stuff that he's been posting on Instagram has been pretty great, like this plastic vortex. Again, he's been doing some really interesting stuff with it, and I kind of just wanted to show some stuff that was on the what I feel like is in the opposite spectrum. I mean, he already has this kind of stuff covered, and I think the other thing that I'm not covering, which he does a lot, is the fractal. Um, you can do loops with it, and that kind of gives you some really, interesting animation. He likes to loop all of these kind of vertical pieces, and I think it works really well. It's not something I've mastered yet, but it's fun. Again, this is one of those plugins that's very kind of open and creative, and even just playing with a couple of sliders, you could get a completely different look. If I just change this to polygons and gave it, low sides, you instantly have changed your effect really fast, and then you play with the material and lighting, you can change everything. It's such a very interesting plugin, and I know there's very surface things that people will do with it, like making, it's kind of like 3D stroke. Like I said, you could have a light animating, and I mean, really, if I just made a path here, and told it that I wanted to actually use the path, and turned off my towel lights. I'm just going to break all my animation because it's, using this build up function to get all of that. But, again, you've taken something that was pretty straightforward and you've already changed it dramatically. So, I mean, it's really interesting, and I encourage everyone to kind of just play with it. It's a lot of fun to get in there and make stuff. Like I said, the best advice I can give for making something interesting that you're happy with is to have definitely an idea of what you want going in. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself lost pretty fast. Look at this. This thing is already a mess. So like my randomness is probably through the roof. But, like that would be your typical 3D stroke effect where you would take that and then animate the offset. Sorry, none of this stuff. Just your plain offset, and you probably want to animate the position, and then you go back. There you go. You would get, your typical 3D stroke stuff, and you could taper that, which I think I just don't have turned on. Taper. There you go. And again, like we've taken a scene that was pretty straightforward and making something else, and we've completely changed it. So there's a lot of stuff that can be done. I know I've probably said that like 10 times, but again, play with it, make some stuff, post it online. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I'm on Instagram as Fried Pixels. Yeah, and I post all kinds of stupid stuff. I'm also on Twitter, same name. There, I'm a little bit more focused on MoGraph, and look at that. MoGraph and animation, visual effects type stuff. I've been posting kind of some experiments that I've been doing in evenings. But yeah, I mean, if there's something that you kind of run into or have questions or anything, by no means, I don't know what I'm doing with this plugin. That's what I mainly enjoy about it. It's fun, but same time, I have a lot of experience playing with it over the months that it went from beta to final release. It looks intimidating. There's definitely lots of settings, and if you added keyframes on all of that, it would have an extremely big timeline, but it's great how much control it has. Okay, rambling, so hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, email, whatever you would like, and maybe I can make another one of these videos, but kind of actually build something from scratch rather than just kind of looking at stuff that I've made. Mainly because I think if you're trying to look at, I mean, like I said, why I didn't want to do that was I feel like those are very specific examples, and You know, it's like if I'm trying to make something boxy, like that might not apply to what you're doing, but I mean, maybe walking you through some of the features that are used to get there might be interesting. So maybe I'll make, like I said, a video of walking through one of these from scratch. They're fun. It's fun to play with. Go have fun.